Yourselves. I'm Donald Loggins, co-chair of the Community Environment Committee. Nina?
And I'm Nina Sabgir, the other co-chair.
Glenn? Anybody else want to introduce themselves?
At the Sun committee member.
Oh, Alvin Burke, board member.
A little Sen.
Zon committee member.
Glenn Wolin, board member.
Shahid Khan, board member.
Any people from Parks want to introduce themselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Walsack. I'm the regional manager. I oversee maintenance and operations for Community Board 14.
Hello.
And hi, I'm Zoe Piccolo. I'm with the planning division and I am here today to present.
Terrific. Are you ready to go?
I think so. Sorry, this app was giving me a little bit of trouble, but I think I hopefully have it. Let me see. Oh, actually, my sharing capability is disabled.
Yep, Zoe, that's me. I'm just going to make you the presenter right now. One moment. And the share screen option should pop up for you.
Give me a second. It's time to look at my system preferences.
Did it pop up at the bottom there? It should be ungraded.
It did. It's telling me that I need to restart the application to be able to share. So if you all just bear with me for one moment. All right.
Okay.
Take your time.
All right.
And Donald, we've also been joined by Sarah Nielsen from Parks.
Great.
Sarah, you are a panelist now.
I just want to say I'm really, really excited about this presentation. I was an attendee for the Brooklyn Greenways meeting a couple of months ago at this point. And yeah, I hope to see things there. I was also joined with CV17. Transportation Committee had a meeting together with DOT to look at streets that could be made more bike and pedestrian friendly. I want to emphasize that that's, making better crossings for pedestrians, is important. And of course, part of it is that, our paths do cross and access into our area provides more access to Prospect Park in particular and the botanical gardens as well. So.
I'm looking forward to this too. Oh, are you ready?
I just wanted to see, can you guys hear me? This is Sarah. Oh, good. Okay, just wanted to say hi.
Welcome.
Well, Zoe figures out her stuff. I had a hard time getting connected, even though I use WebEx all the time during the workday somehow. So apologies to seem to be a few minutes late, but nice to see you all.
So this is cool. So I have the presentation, I think, Sean, that you posted for the CB board. I've got that on my computer and I'm doing this on my phone. So multimedia here.
So techie.
I don't know how I do it.
Now Zoe's saying she's having issues with video and connecting. Does she need to be added as a presenter also?
She came in a different way, so give me one moment.
The other door. Uh-huh.
There's two, yep.
Right.
Okay, Zoe, you should be with us.
There she is.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, it took a second for the audio and video to connect. It wasn't giving me an option. The share also still is not coming up as an option. It's still grayed out.
Oh yeah, no, I have to reconnect you.
Okay.
1 second. And
Yes, great.
okay.
Got it.
It's
We can
working.
see it. Yep.
Yes, excellent.
All right.
Okay, we are getting
We're in
there.
business.
Well, thank you folks for having us, and apologies for the technical difficulties there. We're excited to come in and talk to you about this project today. So just a very quick recap of where we've been and why I think we may have been asked to come today. We gave a few presentations right before Thanksgiving to get folks acquainted with the project and to solicit feedback. So I think someone from your board may have been at one of those meetings and asked us to come along. So here we are today, and happy to kind of give an intro to the project. Just a quick disclaimer, the geography is actually a little bit different than where this community board is, but I think that's okay. And, we're just happy to kind of spread the word. So yeah, thanks for having us. So quick agenda, I'll give a little overview of the project. We'll look at some existing conditions along the site, and then I'll talk a little bit about next steps. So this project, we're calling it Destination Greenways. We're very excited to be finally moving it forward. We had a few COVID-related delays, so we were able to pick up in the fall. And so over at Parks, we're leading this project, but we're working really closely with DOT. We also procured a design team to help us move this project along and create a master plan. So the real point of this project is to create community approved conceptual plans. So this is a planning exercise. These won't be shovel ready designs. However, our goal is that, from this planning process, we'll get information from the community. We'll be able to refine some designs, get some cost estimates for what projects would cost for folks, and then advocate for funding to move these along. We don't have any capital dollars, but we hope that, by having some strong plans that people are really supportive of, we can advocate for the funding and get these projects moving. And so we're actually working on two plans, one for Brooklyn, one for Queens. Obviously we're here today to talk about Brooklyn, but there's a slide with a just quick snapshot of what the Queens plan looks like as well. Thank you to the Helmsley Charitable Trust, who is funding this endeavor. It wouldn't be possible without them, so happy to be here with that. And so kind of before we get into it, I think it's important to kind of take a step back and ask, what is a greenway? So its simplest definition is a pathway or route that runs through green spaces for use by pedestrians, bicyclists, other park patrons. But we think there's more to it than just that. And while a lot of these points, held true before the pandemic, this past year, as kind of we all know, has only highlighted the importance of greenways. They can be used as a way to get from here to there. They can serve as their own destination where people want to go to with family and friends. They provide a link to nature, invaluable, as we all have experienced. Greenways safely connect neighborhoods, provide opportunities for recreational and physical activity. And we've, always thought of these as pillars of greenway network development, but again, the pandemic has only made these even more important. And in the past, just to kind of explain where this project is coming from, there's been a focus on the Manhattan Waterfront Greenway, but we took a look within the Parks portfolio to see where there might be advantageous network improvements elsewhere. and in other boroughs. So 2 areas kind of rose to the top, and this is one of them. The other one is in Queens. These were kind of the most feasible, for lack of a better term, low-hanging fruit, where you know, there were fixes within Parks's realm of possibility. And yeah, looking forward to kind of hearing your thoughts about this as well. And so, hold on. There we go. And so, as I said before, we're working closely with DOT. Parks is leading this effort, and we're the ones who've hired the consultants, but we're kind of making sure that DOT is on board with everything that we do. Our focus is obviously within the parks, and as we'll look at in a little bit, we're really, the kind of background of this project as well is connecting park to park to park. But in between those parks, there are on-street connections. So working with DOT to make sure that those links appropriately exist and connect the parks. And so these are the 2 routes. The one in Brooklyn is obviously on the left, and the one in Queens is on the right. And so you can see we kind of start, you know, Leif Erikson Park over to Owl's Head Park, along Shore Park and Parkway, which goes very far, Bensonhurst Park, to Calvert Vaux, and then down to Coney Island. And you can see for Queens, there's quite a network of parks here as well, but I won't get as much into that. Again, this is the general Brooklyn route. Here are the community boards overlaid, so you can kind of see where you are. You guys aren't too far, a little bit over, but I can definitely see how folks in this area would want to use this greenway. And so these are just some of the connections nearby to subways and some points of interest. Again, just a little bit further down the route. And then this is the DOT bike network overlaid with our route. So these are the existing bike network routes. And so this is the way our team is starting to look at some of the on-street connections, thinking about, you know, where it's very comfortable for a bicyclist or a pedestrian, where it's comfortable, but, you know, maybe a little bit tight, uncomfortable for a bicyclist where you're next to moving traffic, and then very uncomfortable where you're kind of in the middle of an intersection. And so these are some of the existing conditions along the way. You can see on this map on the right, that's kind of the area that's highlighted and where we're showing. So this is up in Leif Erikson Park, an area that may have once been a path, but now has over the decades kind of retreated into more of a desire line. And then if you go a little bit further south on Shore Park and Parkway, you can see this is kind of the northern portion above the Verrazano. Not very many shade options, not many amenities, you know, one bench, a few benches here and there, but thinking about, you know, different things that could be added along here. And then this is one of DOT's pedestrian bridges, and thinking about how to kind of cross over these. And there's a few other DOT projects in the works as well, but just kind of highlighting some different conditions. And then, yeah, looking a little bit further south, south of the Verrazano, you can see some of these conditions where the pavement isn't that great, and folks are kind of, you know, using a path along the side that's on the grass, and maybe, you know, it'd be obviously preferable to be on the path itself. But thinking about, you know, you can also see the grassy area doesn't have many amenities, and thinking about what else can go along there as well. And then as we go all the way south along the route, as many probably know, the connection down across Cropsey and then down to Coney Island Beach is a tricky one. And so that's one that we're thinking about actively as well, and kind of how to make that connection. And so these are just some examples of things that, you know, we thought of, and you know, we brought to folks back in the meetings in November, just to kind of get thoughts going. These are all activities that happen in the neighborhood, which is kind of cool. Lots of stuff going on. So thinking about what sort of community activities could occur along this route. And then these are just some other activities throughout the city for inspiration. Some ideas for nature, ecology, theme, character, all of those sorts of things. ideas for seating, bike amenities, signage, etc. And so then this is just an overview again. And so right now we're starting to think about where we're going with all of the feedback that we received. So we received some great feedback from folks. We obviously had the meetings, but we also, and I'll show you in a second, we had our website, which is still active, but we had some surveys open for quite a while to get additional feedback from folks. So we're now using that feedback to start informing what designs might look like. So our consultants have thought about existing conditions, and now they're kind of bringing everything together, and they're in the beginning phases of their design process. And so here's a quick timeline. As I mentioned before, we had those meetings, and now we're kind of in this analysis and design alternative development phase. So that's where we are now. And so then what we hope to do is in the late spring to come back and do more of those formal meetings that we had right before Thanksgiving to gather more feedback. But instead of last time we kind of asked, you know, are there any areas that you'd like to see improved along the route, or what amenities would you like to see? This will be more focused, and we'll come back with some design alternatives and gives folks some choices and gather feedback that way. And then over late spring and summer, we hope to have some additional feedback opportunities, depending on how the pandemic is. We'll see what exactly those will be, but needless to say, we'll be soliciting for more feedback. And then in the late summer, we'll continue to refine designs, and then based on the feedback received, and then we'll have a final plan by the end of 2021 based on kind of everything that we've heard and the various iterations of design. And so, as I mentioned, we also have a website for the project, and you can access it here, and I can send it along to the board folks as well to distribute if of interest. I know that you can't click onto the video through my screen, so you know what, maybe I can drop it in the chat. I'll drop it in the chat after I'm speaking, but yeah, so this is our website. Feel free to visit and take a look. Otherwise, that is my presentation, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I just wanted to say I put the website in there. Oh, Sean did it too. Oh no, Sean put something else in, but I put in the Greenways website into the chat.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yep.
And we can get that up on our website too. What I put into the chat was, first of all, thank you for the presentation. And I'm sorry, it looks like I might be jumping ahead of people who have their hands up. Is that all right, Donald, Nina?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I have what Community Board 14 has a lot of park envy, because we are, you might know, those of you who work for parks, and I know Elizabeth has heard me say it 1,000 times, we are the community district that ranks last out of 59 community boards in terms of the percentage of our residents who live more than a quarter of a mile away from a park. So this is an exciting project, and I can imagine that it's going to take a lot of your attention as you roll it out. But what I put into the chat was a link to one of our really smart and enthusiastic planning fellows who did a report in 2017 that identified potential green spaces in our district. And I invite everybody at the meeting and you creative thinkers at parks, because this is, you mentioned, is sort of it's a plan that's also aspirational. Maybe you can take a look at some of our sites and give us some ideas and ways to think about really developing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Again,
Thanks for sharing that.
Any questions for Parks?
Nikki has her hand up.
I never know whether I should raise my real hand or my digital hand. Thank you for the presentation. It's really, really exciting. I bike on the path a lot, and I would love to see it improve. So my question for you is, how do you guys actually gather or encourage people that use that to fill out these surveys? Because it looks like you have a lot of different ways people can give you feedback, and I'm just interested in knowing, what do you do to make sure you get a lot of feedback from people that really regularly use the area, especially given the pandemic?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is that we did a lot of web blasting to various groups. And as you said, during a pandemic, it's a little bit more difficult. I think the first time around was, you know, a little bit of a learning curve for us, kind of hosting a large scale Zoom meeting with many breakout rooms and kind of maneuvering that landscape. I think for the spring, we can definitely think about, you know, posting signage along the route with a link or maybe a QR code or something. But yeah, we reached out to a bunch of elected officials too to kind of blast their web lists and to various cycling groups. It's always a challenge, and hopefully this pandemic relaxes a little bit so we can all kind of get back to normal. But yeah, I think yeah, we'll kind of be open to suggestions as well if anything comes up.
And can I just add, I think just two more things to what Zoe said. We've been working with the electeds because a lot of the local elected officials have email mailings that they do. And so when we have our next round of meetings, we'll be circulating through them like we did the last one. So there's that. And then as Zoe mentioned, when we first were planning this project, it was before the coronavirus. And so we actually wanted to be really out on the Greenway with like a pop-up tent and like a lot of activity where you would physically see us, you know, on the Greenway. Because of COVID, we've scaled that back. And so we've done a lot more with the website and digital things. As Zoe said, we're really hoping that by this summer, we will be able to be out at least in some form. So you would actually see us or the consultants or, you know, folks out there talking to actual Greenway users. So that is something we're really hoping we can do.
Yeah, that's great to hear because I feel like, especially from having biked along there, some of the people who might actually most appreciate that area being a greenway are the people least likely to fill out an internet survey. So, and I know you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And but you're exactly right. It's a tough thing to figure out. And then with the, you know, the pandemic, it's like, it's hard for us to, you know, get people to stand outside, you know, but I think by summer we'll be able to at least do more of that sort of thing. Cause that's really who you want is people using it that weekend. And so we'll hope for that.
The only other thing I was going to say is like, in terms of your outreach, just, I don't know if you ever work with transportation alternatives. They have a really great newsletter and okay, you guys know what you're doing. So yeah.
No, but that's great to hear you say that though, because there's always like other groups and other entities. So yeah, we're in touch with them. They're a great part of the sort of outreach. And who else? One thing I'm really trying to get to is more pedestrian user groups because the cyclists are really organized, but I feel like, you know, casual exercise walkers aren't necessarily like in a club kind of thing. So we're trying to at least work with the running group so we get more access to runners. But if you know of sort of like walking clubs or if there's like a church group that has a walking gang or like any of that kind of thing, let us know because that's the kind of club that we'd love to access. And it's hard to find those types of groups. So
my only suggestion, and then I'll shut up, is actually to try and connect with bird watchers. And I would like to reach out to
You're talking to them right now, but that's a great idea. Yeah.
Because my mom's a very active bird watcher and belongs to like the New York State, the local and the National Audubon, and I'm sure they would help with distributing that.
Great idea. Thank you. You're distracting us with this cute person in front of you.
Edwardson has his hand up.
Thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering, since you mentioned the pandemic, is there anything that you're doing with this project to address like the uptick in ridership? Just given people that are not using other means of transportation and are just using bikes?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, no, I think that's helpful framing. Something that kind of we started doing a lot of thinking about. Oh, so cute. Started doing a lot of thinking about you know, as this project started going earlier in the fall, we had originally planned to kick this off back in the spring, right before COVID hit. And so it kind of reframed our entire thinking about it. And as you said, ridership has just increased. And I think, you know, this project is kind of meant, it was meant beforehand to you know, improve a greenway route, but I think the current status of the world has only solidified its importance. And I think that's something that we're keeping in mind as we go forward, and hopefully it helps us advocate for funding for these projects once the plan is complete as well. So I think in that way it could actually be helpful to us. One thing that the pandemic is helpful for, but yeah, definitely something that we're thinking about for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Mina Sabgir has her hand up.
Yeah, so I put it in the chat, but you know, one of the things that, you know, when you talk about, you know, connecting the dots and such, that we have Ocean Parkway, which runs from Prospect Park, you know, through and really goes right up almost to the Greenway. And it's, you know, it's used by people who are out jogging, who are walking, by moms pushing babies in strollers, dads pushing babies in strollers, whoever. You know, kids are walking there to go to school, and the conditions are awful. The pavement, as you progress south, becomes worse and worse. And you know, and my understanding from you know, from Transportation Alternatives anyway, is that there's been kind of an ongoing dispute between the Parks Department and DOT as to whose responsibility it is to take care of it. And all I can say is I wish somebody would, because right there you've got a major thoroughfare that connects the dots between Prospect Park, like I say, and the Greenway. And you know, getting that so that it's you know, safer, better condition would be, you know, really critical, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, we are aware that especially that southern part of the of Ocean Parkway is not in the best shape, and it is sort of an ongoing concern. But we do think that hopefully that sort of elevating the conversation around greenways and greenway quality that we're doing in this project will sort of help us with a path forward for that as well. But understood, it's a tough problem over there. But thanks for raising it. I don't know if Elizabeth, if you wanted to add anything about that. I know it's probably south of your area, but we are aware of it.
It is, yeah. It's south of my area, but it is on the radar for sure, as are all of these, you know, including, I actually used to be the park manager for districts 10 and 11 and 12. So I'm very familiar with all of the issues along the Belt Parkway bike path. And there's a lot of work to be done. So this is really exciting.
Yeah.
Anne Godet has her hand raised.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. Queens section of it, which pretty much ends around Floyd Bennett, but Floyd Bennett Fields. But it's not that far a stretch past Plum Beach and to connect these two sections from Coney Island out to Floyd Bennett, right? So pending the success of this, do you think that's something we could look forward to in the future? Because I think this is a great project.
Thank you. Sorry to cut across there. I just wanted to clarify, and I know that I breezed past this very quickly, but this is actually a little bit further north in Queens. This is up by Flushing Meadow Corona Park. So it's a little bit further, and it may be a little bit more of a stretch to connect, but we are working with the Brooklyn Greenway Initiative kind of ongoing to make sure that they're part of the conversation as well. And you may know that their vision is kind of connecting the whole Jamaica Bay Greenway. That's something that, you know, folks are considering, maybe slightly outside of the scope of this, but we're definitely talking with DOT about some, you know, on-street connections moving forward to kind of connect out to the rest of the Jamaica Bay Greenway too. Oh, I think you may be muted.
Anne, you're muted, Anne.
Sorry?
You were on mute.
Oh.
But now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Flushing as Floyd Bennett. So it flashed by so quickly that my orientation was off. So, but it's good to hear that that's in the conversations for down the road, down the calendar. Thank you.
Thanks.
And thanks for your comment in the chat about the outreach out in the Greenway. It's helpful.
Okay, co-chairs, I don't see any other hands raised at this time. Donald and Nina.
Move on to the next topic if everybody's ready. The next presenters.
All right, thank you, folks.
Thank you very much, Parks.
Thanks for having us. Nice to see you all. Have a good night.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take it away, Donald.
Okay, can the next presenters start their presentation?
Elizabeth, are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay, Elizabeth, I'm going to make you the presenter, and I believe you're also joined by, give me one moment, by Dylan Oakley. 1 moment. Okay, so you should see the share screen option available there.
Okay, great. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And Dylan, you're on as well?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So glad to be here tonight. My name is Elizabeth Roisman, and I'm from the Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board with my colleague Dylan. We're going to tell you a little bit about what we do at the Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board, also known as Brooklyn SWAB. So I'm going to go through a presentation and then your questions and get your feedback. We want to make it as interactive as possible, and I know it's a little hard in this virtual environment, so please use the chat feature to let us know your thoughts and feedback as we go along. A little bit about me. I've been part of the Solid Waste Advisory Board for 4 years. I am currently board secretary, and I have experience working for architecture and engineering firms in sales, and I'm also a master composter and community gardener. And Dylan has also been part of the SWAB for 4 years, and he's an energy consultant and a master composter as well. I am moving on to the next slide.
Okay, so I'm sort of curious just off the bat, how many of you out there are familiar with the city's plan to divert 100% of its waste from landfills by 2030? If maybe you can just, if you have your cameras on, you can just put your hands up, or you can raise them in the chat there. Yeah, it's so this was a pledge that Mayor de Blasio made early on in his tenure, and he doesn't mention it much these days because we are long and the short of it is we are not on track, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But the long and the short of it is that there never really was a comprehensive plan to get there. Just briefly, about a third of our residential waste stream is completely recyclable. And by that, I mean we're expected to separate it and set it out and have the sanitation department pick it up. So that is paper and plastic and metal glass, or sorry, paper and cardboard and then metal, glass, and plastic. Metal, glass, and plastic goes to a sorting facility in Brooklyn, and then the cardboard and paper actually get recycled in Staten Island. A lot of it made into pizza boxes. So that's kind of a success story. On the other side of things, about a third of our waste, about a third of it is organic waste. And when I say organic waste, I mean products that come from plants or animals. So this would be, not only food scraps, but leaves, plant cuttings, grass, and also soil, paper towels, plates, that sort of thing. All of that is recyclable and it can be composted. It can be turned into energy. And the city actually had a plan to do this, and they were rolling out collection of organic waste. However, this due to budget cuts after COVID. A lot of people fought really hard to get some of that funding restored. Which were successful in doing. So there are some food scrap drop-off sites, which we'll touch on later. Liz, if you want to go to the next slide.
Yep. So 0 by 30, the 0 by 30 goal was meant to address some of our major challenges with waste. One of the issues is environmental injustice. There are certain communities in New York City bear a disproportionate burden of our current waste system. Communities that are typically low income communities of color live next to waste transfer stations. So they see a lot of waste truck traffic going through their streets. And also they live close to the operations of these waste transfer facilities, which makes the air quality worse. And we know that with the COVID pandemic, worse air quality leads to more chances of sickness and death. And the same thing applies to communities that our waste is exported. People who live close to incinerators or landfills also suffer the effects of poor air quality and other environmental problems. Another issue that Dylan mentioned, we recycle some of our waste, but we could recycle a lot more. The pie chart shows a waste characterization study from the 2017 Department of Sanitation report. This is what is in our trash. So 34% is metal, glass, and plastic, and paper. And we recycle only about 15% out of that 34% pie chart. And about 34% in our trash is organic, food, and yard waste. And in the best of times, we recycled only about 1% of that. Another 9% is household materials like textiles and electronics that can be recycled. And there's about 23% in our waste that's not recyclable. So there's a great potential to recycle up to 80% of the material in our trash. And incinerators and landfills have harmful effects for air quality, but also it's a climate issue. Incinerators produce carbon emissions, and landfills produce methane, which is 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So climate change affects us all. And then the cost of business as usual is huge. We spend $430 million annually to export our waste to other states. And that number just keeps going up. So we need to come up with innovative ways to divert more and export less waste.
So the Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board, or the SWAB, as we like to call ourselves, is a volunteer civic engagement group. We're focused on waste and related environmental issues. We were originally created, I believe, in 1989 by the City Council with a directive to advise the borough president, again, on waste-related issues. We also advise local city council members and other state representatives. There are SWABs right now in Queens, in Manhattan, and in the Bronx. And our members are vetted and appointed by the Brooklyn Borough President. Are open to the public. We encourage any and all to come to our meetings. New members are always welcome, and we meet on the first Monday of each month, 6:30 p.m. We'll post this again. I think on the last slide has a lot of this information. But we a big part of the reason we're here right now is to invite all of you to come and join us. Obviously, we're meeting on Zoom these days. That will continue for the foreseeable future. So yeah, just a call to please please come join us and bring your interests. Liz, if you go to the next slide. So these are the committees that we currently have as part of the SWAB. We are, I would say, comprised of some industry professionals, but more kind of on the concerned citizen side. At most of our meetings, there are usually more non-members there than there are members. So we try to be very open, very inclusive, very welcoming, and we always have a lot of great discussions. So again, join us. We're always open for new topics, new ideas, new committees. Next slide. And another thing that we do is we have hosted events. These are always free and open to the public. This is a list of some of them that we've hosted over the past year. And one that I'll just kind of draw your attention to as an example, we had a panel on waste and environmental justice and waste equity issues. And as kind of an outgrowth of that, we have been in dialogue with a number of residents and organizers who live in NYCHA buildings. And they have been working really hard to improve their recycling program there. Which, although it's there and in existence, it really has not been going well, mostly due to poor design and infrastructural issues that they have. So that's a topic that we've taken on in support of those folks. Next slide, please.
Another thing that we do at Brooklyn SWAB is we prepare testimony for hearings. And this past year, we've testified in support of community composting, street cleanliness, and the CORE Act, which was a bill introduced to create a recycling center in every community district for organics, textiles, and electronics. We are also part of several coalitions. This allows us to have a greater impact. This year, we've been working with the Save Our Compost Coalition to partially restore community composting funding, which was cut in spring of 2020. As a result of these efforts, the City Council restored $2.8 million to continue food scrap drop-off locations. And that's why the Cortelu Market has resumed food scrap drop-off collections starting in the fall. We have also advocated this year for big reuse and the Lower East Side Ecology Center. Both of these organizations have compost processing yards in New York City that are on Parks Department land. And for various reasons, their leases are not being renewed. So we will support for these organizations to either remain where they are or to get help from the city to move to a different location, because their work is so essential to keeping composting going in New York City, which is a vital part to getting to zero waste. Local compost processing provides jobs, education, and volunteer opportunities to learn about ecology and composting. So very important work that they're doing. As part of the Bag It Coalition, we've also worked to ban single-use plastic bags. And as we know, that the single-use plastic bags have been banned, and that went into effect this past October. And this is such a great example of a major waste reduction initiative. There was so much conversation, how would we do without single-use plastic bags? And with the bag ban in place now, we've seen such a big change. Bringing your own reusable bags to the store is a common sense, no-brainer kind of thing. And we see a lot less plastic bags littering our streets.
So just on a really practical note, this is obviously a map of the district, and you can see there are 3 current drop-off spots, all in the northern part of the district for food scraps. And obviously the southern part of Community Board 14 is a bit of a food scrap drop-off desert. So so that's very much the type of issue that we might consider taking up as a point of advocacy. Next slide, please, Liz.
These are some of the locations where you could drop off your textiles for recycling. The blue dots indicate locations such as Canva, Copo, and several churches that accept clothing donations. Also, the Grand Army Plaza Green Market hosts textile recycling on Saturday mornings year-round. And Grow NYC, the organization that runs the green markets, also hosts a stop and swap event where people can bring clothing and household items and then go home with some new to you items. Department of Sanitation has a textile drop-off map that you can find just by simply Googling it, which also provides other locations for drop-off bins. Some of these are listed here. And New York City also has a program called Refashion NYC. It's for buildings with 10 or more units. You could request a clothing bin put in a common area to make it easier for all building residents to recycle. And the link is provided at the bottom here.
So somewhat similarly, electronics are another sort of classically hard to recycle item, but not only are they recyclable, they are by law mandated to be recycled. So the Department of Sanitation used to host e-scrap or e-waste drop-off events periodically. Those two have fallen victim to COVID budget cuts. But there are a number of stores that some of whom I should say still accept our e-waste. I know Staples and Best Buy are among them, but it's not necessarily every location. So if you're interested, I would call ahead first before you actually head over there. Next slide, please.
And New York City also recycles other hard to recycle items like paint, thermometers, batteries, compact fluorescent bulbs. These typically would get dropped off at a special waste site. There's one in each borough, and of course they're suspended through 2021. But ongoing, you could still recycle your refrigerators and air conditioners by making an appointment with the Department of Sanitation for pickup. And pharmaceuticals also, a law has been passed recently. Many pharmacies have drop-off boxes for your old pharmaceuticals. And I believe the police precinct has 1 day a year where you can bring in old drugs that you no longer need. And of course, New York City recycles Christmas trees at the beloved Mulch Fest event that takes place every January. This link below is a great resource. Go to this link to type in, any random thing you might need to get rid of, and it will tell you if there's a recycling program for it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just sort of a list of typical issues that we often discuss and that we often hear from Brooklyn residents, but it's by no means meant to be suggestive or exhaustive. Just kind of putting some ideas out there. And I'll just kind of close by reiterating our invitation for you all to come join us and bring your concerns and your thoughts and your ideas to our meetings, but also if you want to drop them in the chat, or if you've got time for some questions after this, we'd love to hear from you. So thanks a lot for having us.
And these are some of the ways you can get in touch with us. We're on social media. Please follow us. We also have, you can email us to request to be put on our mailing list. We will email monthly meeting notifications. And that's a great way to stay in touch with us. Also, all our meetings are recorded and posted on YouTube as well as special events. And we have a website. So thank you so much. This concludes our presentation, and now we'd like to hear from you.
Ryan Wallen has a hand raised.
Hi, thank you very much for that presentation. It was very nice. It seems to me there are a lot of recycling projects around the city and around Brooklyn, and I know I've been recycling for quite a few years, but it seems that there's a lot less of the recycling being recycled. Is that correct? And if so, what's the problem?
I didn't totally hear the end of that. I don't know if that was on my end.
It seems that there's more material being recycled, being collected than being recycled. If that's true, what's the problem?
Dylan, I can start.
Sure.
Okay. There's been a lot of coverage in the media about, China not taking U.S. recyclables anymore. And there was some publicity about a compost facility that was shut down. So there are national problems with recycling, but because the Northeast definitely has like a more stable kind of recycling industry. So Northeast hasn't been hit as much. There's the recycling facility in Sunset Park, and Sims has a 20-year contract to operate that. So you can be sure that New York City is recycling what you put in their recycling bin. The markets have been suffering, but having that long contract ensures that continuity that other places may not have. Is that what you were referring to?
Pretty much. I'm just hoping that at least most of the material you're collecting is actually being recycled in a useful manner. Now, I do have one other concern, I guess, with the organic recycling. It seems to me that we're at a small percentage of the total garbage and recycling. And if you take that out and do something with it, on one hand, it seems like a good thing. On the other hand, that's the only really viable thing that goes into the landfills to make them functional in the future. Isn't that true?
Well, organic material in a landfill is not actually anything that helps landfills be. You know, organic material needs air to decompose properly. So composting it is actually the best thing because unlike plastic, which is hard to recycle, and you know, there's definitely issues with that, you know, greenwashing about plastic recycling. Organics has a very clear recycling track. You know, you deal with it appropriately, it becomes compost matter to enrich our soil. You know, so the more we do that, you know, the more green space we will have in New York City and the healthier our soils will be. And it's also related to food security. A lot of community gardens compost, and hence they don't need to use fertilizers. So it may seem like a small amount, like per household, but combined, you know, it's like the heaviest waste. And to ship it to Virginia compared to letting it process in a facility nearby, you know, it makes much better economic sense to have large scale recycling locally.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
And Burnett has a hand raised. Sorry, Dylan, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add to that, just sort of from an ecological perspective, and not to get too, you know, circle of life about it, but when you remove those nutrients from the natural processes by which they get recycled, you know, you're essentially taking them and entombing them, you know, in these landfills. So the, you know, the bottom line is like Liz said, they're actually resources. We need to start thinking about that one.
And actually, that's the methane emissions that landfills emit from organic matter decomposing.
And Burnett has her hand raised.
Thank you. I think Nikki's hand was up first, but I'll jump in. So going back to the organic recycling, which was extended from Staten Island through sections of Brooklyn and then further into the neighborhoods. And it seemed to be very, very well received and very active. I think about 2 years ago, I went out to Staten Island to a recycling facility that accepted landscapers, organics, as well as some school, and they had a gorilla that broke it apart, and I forget what they called the thing that was giant that laid out the runs. Fabulous facility. And it showed a landfill that they were actually reclaiming for a public park. So it was a very exciting trip as a gardener and a composter. But I was so sad to see that this was, the program was cut, as many other projects have been cut. So you mentioned that there has been a slight restoration to collections for 2.8 million from the council, which we would likely see a restoration to the Department of Sanitation organics program at all, or is that just not part of the conversation presently? Thank you.
Dylan, I could start and jump in. It was well received, but because it wasn't mandatory and only some districts had it and only a small percentage of people in those districts who had it were using the program. The program was very expensive. You know, the cost per pound of picking up organic waste was so much more expensive than picking up trash. And so there was a lot of feedback. Well, the program is just not successful. People are not doing it. They're grossed out. But if you make it mandatory, which sounds counterintuitive, you're going to raise the volume and the price of the program is going to go down. So there is advocacy to make it citywide because that's the only viable way it will survive. But with composting, it's also many approaches. There is this citywide mandatory push, but there's also many people that are happy to go drop it off and to have more locations available. The people that drop it off are diehards. They never have any contamination in their organics, So a multi-pronged approach would work best. And yes, the enthusiasm of those people, has shown the city that this is something that people want.
Yeah, just kind of on the political side of things. I mean, we were assured by a number of different city council representatives that the political will was definitely there for continuing to expand the program and possibly making it mandatory. That was, a little over a year ago, and obviously everything has changed. So yeah, we're really hoping to see it back as soon as we can get there.
I see questions from Nikki and Lena, and I'm sorry I don't know who had their hand up first.
If that's okay. I have two questions. One is really easy and the other one is more complex. I don't think you mentioned it, but I'm sorry if it was in your slides and I just didn't read along with them quick enough. How do you actually, what are the logistics or the mechanics of how you provide advice to the city or how you serve in that advisory role? Like, clearly you're hosting awesome events and meeting with lots of people and collecting feedback. How do you actually deliver that advice to the city of New York or to the borough? That was my first question.
We have a Brooklyn Borough President representative at all our meetings, and we touch base with him on a monthly basis, and he passes that along to the Brooklyn Borough President. That's a direct way. We also meet with representatives on different topics when necessary. And also, we are coordinating with the Manhattan Swab and the Queens Swab and the Bronx Swab, and they all have relationships with their elected officials too. So those are some of the ways. But we definitely need better relationships with them, and that's something that we're working on.
There's usually a representative from Councilmember Reynoso's office at our meetings too, and he's the chair of the Sanitation and Solid Waste Committee on the City Council. So we've got pretty close relationships with a number of City Council members. They routinely reach out to us and vice versa about waste-related topics and associated legislation.
That's great, and I think it's also interesting that you guys can meet with the others. My second, more philosophical question. Clearly, the organics program is, of interest. So my question is really, and I'm kind of asking your personal opinions as people who know a lot about this topic, is I too would love the organics program to come back. I am an enthusiastic composter who drops my compost off at the Cortelyou Road stop. But I feel like all we ever discuss are two models. It's either like everybody has a compost bin and they go down to the green market and they drop it off, or it's going to be a citywide program. I feel like, are there any other interesting models for managing organic composting in a large city? Like that's some sort of a blended approach. Because I feel that as long as I do want to get to a point where it's mandatory, but do you guys in your capacity hear of any other interesting models that are somewhere in between the two? We live in the age of like everything by subscription, right? So any cool stuff out there in the world of organics pickup?
Dylan, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you know, you sort of said it in your question, and we've had a lot of sort of far-ranging discussions about ways to kind of merge those models, and kind of sort of hybrid versions, if you will. We've got some members actually, of the Brooklyn Swab have their own composting companies, and we've tried to have discussions about how to get microcarters involved. So, you know, people who locally pick up from you know, restaurants and coffee shops and that sort of thing. You know, the idea is we'd love to see a lot of the processing be done locally, whether that's, you know, in parks, in community gardens, you know, industrial sites, whatever makes sense.
And some of the micro haulers that Dylan mentioned, there's a company called Bokashi. They pick up from your house. You know, like if you think of it as like a utility service, you know, like you pay like $10 or $15 a month, and then every time you have a full bucket, they come and pick it up. So that works for people who want to do this but don't have the time to go drop it off. There's also a company called EcoRich. They've designed this industrial scale machine that could process hundreds of pounds of food waste a day, and then end up with like an end product in like a very short amount of time. And they actually piloted using one of the EcoRich machines in a NYCHA building. And I know that there's been companies or maybe like food markets who have also bought this machine on site. It costs something like $15,000, $20,000, but you know, you're set. And then Antonio Reynoso, the chair of the sanitation committee, he proposed having like a drop-off box on every corner, you know, so people may not like to have their waste, their food waste set out in a bucket to get up once or twice a week. They might want to go drop it off, you know, hence the CORE Act, the bill that was introduced to create a recycling facility center in every community district. Because picking it up household to household is inefficient, you know, and New York City is so complicated. We have a lot of single family homes, but we also have, you know, multi-unit huge buildings, and how do we manage that? So those are some of the challenges. And yeah, definitely a variety of approaches would kind of begin to solve some of those issues.
Nina?
Models in other cities where people actually have, you know, cargo bikes that are outfitted in with, you know, with like a large platform and bins, and they can collect, you know, like I know I go over to the Portello Green Park, but I can either bicycle, or sometimes I've gone by, I have a scooter, or I'm there, and then, you know, I get in going shopping. Otherwise I have to drive. But some may have limited ability and not be able to walk that far. The location all sort of in one lopsided neighborhood. You know, it does definitely make a barrier. What I was actually going to talk about, I went to the, or attended, I guess virtually, the plastics, what's it called? The conference about all the issues with plastic and the fact that it's, so much of it isn't recycled. And that, yeah, beyond plastic. So one of the things that I've been very aware of is that surprisingly, especially from the communities that are, more hard hit economically and more affected by waste and garbage and everything else, that I also see actually a surprisingly higher use of single-use plastic. I've seen, like elderly women pushing huge shopping carts loaded with crates of bottled water. I'm not talking about a large bottle of water that gets put into a cooler, but cases of single bottles. And it's like, why is that their way of getting water? And sometimes I ask my patients, because I work at Kingsbrook, why are you, buying water like that? Why don't you get a bottle that you can refill? And they often say, oh, well, I don't like the way tap water tastes. And I'm sure it's all up there. I've tried to kind of push the idea of getting like a Brita filter pitcher and refilling it, and and then pouring the water from that into a reusable bottle. But I'm just wondering what kinds of efforts are being made to to educate the public that we've got to stop using all of this plastic. It doesn't get recycled. It only becomes trash. And if you want to get rid of the rats, get rid of the trash. It's all part of the same picture. You want cleaner air, get rid of the trash. So I was wondering if you can address what kinds of outreach is being done, to get people to change what they do.
Yeah, now I'm unmuted. Okay. I was going to say broadly, I think this is a topic that is getting a lot more attention now. It's also there's sort of a bit of a convergence happening where right now the oil industry kind of looks at the lay of the land, and they see the widespread adoption of renewable sources of energy. So their sort of plan B is to start marketing more plastic, because of course plastic is a petroleum product. So there's going to be a real fight on our hands over the next few years and decades about this. But
I'm old enough to remember when detergent phosphate stuff became known that this was getting into the water and it was creating unhealthy algae and all kinds of other ecosystem problems. And it was actually a consumer-driven thing to change the content of dishwasher and dishwashing, like hand dishwashing, and laundry detergent content to get rid of some of these really nasty things that were in it, that was contributing to water pollution. So, as much as the oil industries may want to be promoting more plastic, I think it can be a consumer-driven thing to say no. Find something else to do.
Yeah, and I think that is happening more and more.
Okay, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised. Oh, Nikki, I think your hand is still raised from before, but just in case. Anyone else like to ask a question?
No, well, in that case, we want to thank you for coming, and you really gave a very nice presentation. We'd like to have you back at some point in the future, hopefully.
Thank you so much. Anytime.
No, you're welcome.
Plastics presentation was amazing.
It was great. Is there any other new business? Anybody raising their hands for new business? No? In that case, everybody have a good night and watch out for the weather tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night and stay safe.
Yes.
Good night.
Bye.
Be well.
Get vaccinated if you can find a place.
Yep. And
Good night, everyone. Good night, Alvin.